Today we're diving into Shadow Work Simplified, the dirty work of awakening. Now, the shadow might not be what we think it is, because there is an aspect of our own unconsciousness that we all go through, right? And that from a certain state or a certain level of awareness, we would act out certain patterns. Because when we realize that we're all one, we wouldn't act out the same kind of patterns of toxicity or necessarily have the same issues that come with that contrast. And yet, when we come in and we're born here, we forget certain aspects of who we are, and we have certain relationship dynamics and start to also understand that what we see in the world at large, with certain distortions around power dynamics and even in the financial and different industries, is a reflection of the collective shadow. So even if we talk about the shadow as the darkness, you could also look at the darkness as simply that which is unconscious. And so shadow work is about bringing the light of our consciousness into the dark or the shadow of what is unseen or what is unconscious. And typically what happens is that we develop these patterns of, say, we have a long-standing pattern of not having good health. Well, that is the shadow of health. We have a long-standing pattern of scarcity. Well, scarcity is the shadow of abundance. See, a shadow implies when light hits an object, there's a shadow cast from behind. But the shadow, the darkness, exists only relative to the light, and the light exists relative to the darkness. If there was only light, there would only be light. If there was only dark, there would only be dark. So the shadow in and of itself is a shadow cast off something that is the actual reality. So it's doing shadow work has a bit of a trickster energy, because when you bring your awareness to what is unconscious or what is hidden in that shadow aspect, you actually transmute and you see the deeper reality that the shadow is being cast off of. So as you transmute those toxic relationships, you reveal the truth of harmony, and harmony in your relationships becomes the reality, becomes your new reality. When you dispel the illusion, when you integrate, when you clear, transmute, heal through the health issues, then that reality of health returns to you, right? When you clear through the issues around love, love is the reality that is there. It's the reality that is underneath. But the thing is when we don't integrate our own shadow, when we don't look at these aspects of ourselves, whatever remains unprocessed or unintegrated within us tends to play out in our behaviors and in our habitual ways of being and thinking, and also what we project onto the screen of space or what we attract, because it's habitual, it's familiar. So we're going to be diving deeper into this, and even looking at that word familiar, the root of familiar is family, right? So what feels safe sometimes to us is to stay in that, we're the comfort zone of what we've always known. But when we bring our light into the shadow and realize that, the shadow is I'm not living my full potential. So when we bring our light to that, we see that there's certain layers of conditioning, right? And you may call them subconscious patterns or simply feeling states that get lodged into our body. And this is a memory. And it's stored in what's called our somatic body. And somatic comes from soma, and it's about the feeling states in your body. It's the idea that feelings in your body hold a memory of whatever that initial traumatic event was, and then it becomes a familiar thought. It becomes a familiar habitual tendency. It becomes ingrained into your subconscious. It becomes ingrained into your self-concept, and also what you settle for or what you don't, or what you put up with or what you don't, or how you live your potential or or if you don't, or what kind of relationships, because there are harmonious soul connections for you, there's abundance for you, there is living in your purpose is for you, right? All these things that we ascribe as divine or qualities of a high nature, that when we're, by transmuting that, by doing the shadow work and going and into and embracing the uncomfortable, we're now becoming familiar with the unfamiliar. And this is like breaking the habit of being the old self, because you're bringing your awareness into the dark. And also inside of what is unconscious is also what is unknown. So there's a gift to every shadow, and there's a blessing that comes with every gift. So a bit of my own story of how I saw those familiar patterns play out happened when I was a kid. My birth parents split up, and I was raised by my mom and stepdad in Indiana, and I wasn't in contact with my father for 15 years, and I felt really abandoned, and through some experiences of not having healthy masculine role models, I gained a lot of resentment towards men and masculinity, and the toxic masculinity that was portrayed in culture, and created this inner rebel kind of archetype. And also how that played out in me understanding the distortions of the old paradigm of masculinity, and how that's playing out as, you know, the awakening on this planet is going on and all the BS is being revealed. It's also being able to see it as an external reflection of a lesson, a life lesson for me, of as I went in and I healed that, and I looked and I felt into that sense of where I was abandoned, and I was able to hold myself. And because that's what the distortion comes from too, like the mother represents the nurturing, the father represents the protecting. And because the parents, when I grew up, like when as I was growing up, like my mom and my stepdad often were working, and I struggled a lot at school, so I had trouble focusing, and a lot of people thought there was something wrong with me. So they took me to a doctor and said I had ADHD, and put me on some pharmaceutical medications. It was a couple different ones, and eventually Ritalin. And I was on that for 10 years. And as a child, I had a really intense imagination, a really connection to this magic. Like my imagination was so powerful. I'd even be sitting in class and I'd like go into this other dimension, and people would have to like wake me up. But I just had this sense that there was this deeper reality to underneath our reality, in our dreams, and just feeling really connected to this energy and creativity. And then I kind of lost that creative spark for a while as I forgot who I was, and it almost felt like I was becoming a zombie, because I became really depressed, and a lot of the programming, a lot of the really foods that I grew up on, a lot of processed industrial foods, very toxic, bad for the health. Pretty much everyone in the family there was dealing with some kind of health issue, bodies breaking down, people not really happy, going and seeing this story of like, you basically like go to school, do this thing, and this is what success is, and looking around and no one's happy. And I wasn't happy, and I was really depressed. I had severe anxiety. I would often not be very social. I was kind of identified as the shy guy. I got picked on for a while, and then I started to in a way choose myself and start to stand up for myself. And I remember this one day, I was like, there's this bully that he was like a college football guy, and he's like way taller than me, and he's picking on me. And I went and stood up to him, and he wanted to fight me, and I just said, "You're gonna do what you're gonna do. I'm not gonna fight you." And I just faced him, and I just like faced the fear, and then I was just not afraid of him anymore. No matter, it was just like, you're gonna do what you're gonna do, but I'm not gonna live in fear. and I'm not gonna. So I made that a boundary, and that was like the first time. I was young, and it was like the first time I really made a boundary for myself. Like I had actually valued myself, because when you have abandonment wounds, what happens is that the solid protector masculine energy kind of feels like not fully there, and the nurturing, like if you don't get enough kind of like certain type of nurturing or presence early on in life, it creates this sense of abandonment, and it creates this sense that I'm unlovable and I'm unworthy. And this is no blame towards my parents. It has nothing to do with that, because I've taken responsibility and forgiven that by looking at it and by feeling those uncomfortable emotions that came up. And this is a process of many years of being able to simply breathe and to feel it and to meet the darkness with love and to meet those stories and to allow them to transmute, because awareness is the conduit for transformation. So shadow work is a tool that I used to help me realize that I was abandoning myself. Like even as I was getting older, like there were certain patterns of I would attract like kind of like toxic relationships with ex-girlfriends and stuff like that where they were like emotionally abusive or emotional unavailability. And it was because it was a reflection of my own lack of self-worth and feeling like I wasn't prioritized, or that I didn't matter to my father enough for him to call me when I was a kid. And, you know, this even plays up to today. I have an amazing relationship with him now that we have reconnected, and we're both on a journey of growth. He's someone that I really respect, and I'm glad that we reconnected like years ago. And you know, it was this kind of same, like it's like the same little pattern of just like him saying he was going to call me back, and then he's going to call me back later the day or tomorrow, and then he didn't call me back, or maybe it'd be 2 days later I'd run into him, or he was super busy. And today I just was like, I did a loving confrontation, and I called him up, and we had a little get together, and I just expressed what was going on, and he took full accountability for it. And I also said that I'm at this place now where it's just like, I'm not going to let this affect my happiness, you know. But it was it was a beautiful thing to see like how we each, like it was an opportunity of growth for him too. Like we each had our own lessons in it. And for me, it was standing up for myself. It was expressing what I needed. It was, you know, like having my own energetic boundaries and feeling safe to like even do that. Like I used to avoid confrontation and be a people pleaser. And I think, you know, I kind of saw that from different aspects of family growing up, where it was kind of like one person would want something, but it wasn't what the other person wants. So they would shrink down and they would go along with it. But then there'd be kind of like this little bit of resentment or passive aggressiveness. And so like I grew up thinking that was normal. But see, this is how shadow work is light work, because it's not normal. It's like when you're energetically, or you're empathic or whatever beyond the label, you're just psychically tuned into the energy. You just feel the energy. It's like you can feel the energy. And so like it feels uncomfortable, because especially like if you're a highly sensitive, like energetically sensitive person, you pick up on those energy dynamics. And a big shift that helped me, it was when I read the Celestine Prophecy. And this was like right before I moved out of my parents' house, and I went out west and started living in the Four Corners area and traveling, and going through a lot of healing and a lot of like deconstruction of programming, and really reconnecting to the land and finding my soul tribe fam, and just like getting more into a different reality. And well, when I was in that other reality, I was surrounded by people who didn't really understand me, and I realized that was one of my core wounds. Is I never felt understood. I never felt fully seen by people, and I didn't feel like people really heard me. A lot of times people would talk over me, or not really hear what I had to say, or I would just kind of shrink down. And it's kind of interesting for somebody who's so expressive. This is why I say the gift and the blessing is in it, because through that contrast, it's like Now I have a voice and I know what it's like to be voiceless. I know what it's like to lock yourself away in your room and not want to talk to anybody and just kind of put your hood up. And but we can't avoid life forever. So that's why shadow work is so powerful, because there's a value in those stages. Like in that point in my life when I read Celestine Prophecy, I was more in like an inward phase and really trying to work on myself. And that's what happens when you start devoting to working on yourself, is the stuff's just going to come up, right? Like everything I'm talking about here is really not that complicated. Like you devote yourself to your soul's mission and path in life, the stuff comes up. When it comes up, you love it and you heal it. Okay? Like, don't put me on a pedestal for telling you that. It's like really not that hard. But it can be hard. And at that time, it was really hard. I was just struggling a lot and just trying to get my mind clear and get my health back and changing my diet to all. It's not even a diet. It's changing my way of life to being healthy foods, actually rich with life force energy, and doing breath work and yoga and waking up early and tapping in to being like, wait, I actually have a purpose in life, and realizing like I was just like asleep in this, this state. And I read the Celestine Prophecy, and it was like, it's talking about different energy dynamics in relationships, and there are different ways of externally getting the energy. So that's the shadow. When you don't get the energy from within, meaning integrate the shadow, and find the love within, or find the quality of the feeling or the connection to the source, the ever flowing source, divinity, God, whatever you want to call it, is that you try to always find it from outside people. And it's called, that's what manipulation is. That's what violence and manipulation comes from, is all of this trying to get energy from outside of you. But what was interesting is we typically would think of like somebody who's like a bully as being the only one who tries to get energy, but the way that they get energy is more through force, right? Even if they're not physically violent, they're emotionally abusive, and that gets somebody's attention. And then that person's attention, even though they're suffering, feeds their ego, and it feeds them energy because they're giving them their attention. But then even the bully, that's coming from their trauma. That's coming from their childhood trauma. That's coming from their past life trauma. That's coming from the part of them that thinks that maybe they're not worthy of just being loved for who they are, so they need to pick on others because maybe they just feel really deep down insecure. Because really think about it. If you felt really secure within yourself, like when you feel secure in yourself and you're really in a state of self-love, not only is there no need to, there's never a desire or a thought to try to dominate or put someone down to get something that you already have from a source that gives it to you way, way, way better. And you understand that there's negative consequences to that. So they're coming from that state of consciousness that's from their own trauma. Now, another way of getting the energy is to be the poor me, and is the perpetual victim, right? And this is not a victim shaming thing or anything like that. We all go through it, okay? I'm saying that there's a way that if you perpetually stay the identity of the victim, it's a way of being poor me, is a way of always getting energy, because people are pulled into the story of the drama that happened, and it's a way of feeding on other people's energy. And again, shadow work heals and integrates that, so you no longer feel like a victim, because it heals the parts of the reflection that you shared with the bully archetype. And then there's also the archetype of the aloof, which is like kind of like not being present or just being like mysterious in a dubious way, because it's another way of getting attention. So it's like you're not really ever fully, it's like the lack of emotional availability, but it like kind of keep people at a distance, but it's a way of manipulation and playing games. And you see this in romantic relationships, men and women, and all the things. It's a way of, all these things are essentially, until we integrate the shadow, it's like these relationship games. And then also you get those in your external reality. So anyways, what I realized is that I was living as kind of this people pleaser dynamic, kind of like always like, like I wasn't fully advocating for my needs, or like, if they want to do that, I'll just give into it. And what that is, it's a lack of solid boundaries. So, and it comes from a lack of self-worth from the abandonment wound. When you love and heal that, which just starts with breath, awareness, going into it, and bringing it into the light, and loving what you find and welcoming at home. And there's different techniques that I'll touch on in a little bit, like as well as intentional shadow work meditation. But essentially, as I started to do this process of integrating these parts of myself, the parts come together as a greater whole. And even the parts of yourself that you judge, like it's like you can heal and clear through judging and forgiving somebody, even if you're going to keep them at an arm's length, who messed with you in the past. But then it's another thing too, also heal and forgive yourself for the shame that you felt around the places where you didn't have boundaries, or where you didn't speak up for yourself, or even just feeling anywhere you felt ashamed that you did something that hurt someone else. It's like there's also a point where it's like it all stops with me. Right? This is the childhood. We're talking ancestral. We're talking timelines. We're talking all the way back to source. Like you're here in the now moment. Your awareness has the power to heal it all. You know, and that's the thing that I realized is like as I took full responsibility, ability to respond, and I stopped reacting to life. I took responsibility for myself, and I owned my own frame, and I dropped into my body and grounded into the earth. And I started to process these energies that were stuck in the lower 3 energy centers. In the root, feeling of safety. In the sacral, feeling of support. And in this solar plexus, the feeling of being empowered or being safe to be yourself, right? Feeling like a solid sense of self. So I started to bring my awareness to those places where I wasn't having a solid sense or solid boundaries or communication with other people, and it was allowing these dynamics to go on, or how I was putting up with certain things. And as I started to clear and change that and love myself, those dynamics in my life started to change, and I let go of and had boundaries with those kinds of relationships, those toxic relationships, you know, those manipulative, lying relationships. And I resonated to a new vibration where I attracted different kinds of relationships that were more heart-centered and more like we're both growing spiritually, whereas mutual respect and love. And not just in love relationships that I've experienced, but also in friendships and in family, and who I choose to resonate with, because your vibe attracts your tribe. So if you're surrounded by negative people, it's harder for you to get into a higher state if you're constantly complaining and doing this thing. That's the integrated shadow. Because complaining and processing are not the same thing. That's something that I had to learn. Really going into it, feeling through it, healing through it, is more of an energy of vulnerability, right? And vulnerability can be scary because you're actually feeling it, you're actually exploring it, you're actually being curious about what's coming up. And that's why it can be helpful to also cultivate a bit of play and a bit of lightness in the shadow work, which I learned through Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott, who now goes by Lovewell. And that was more of a practice where you can, what I learned from that was basically having more of a loving, curious, playful energy with your shadow, where you're like investigating it and going into it with more of that energy of like approving of whatever comes up. Because often what happens is that we shame the shame, we judge the judgment. We turn away and we try to ignore the shadow and just think on the positive. But then it gets held in your somatic body, it gets held in your subconscious tank, and then you wonder why all these shitty patterns are still playing out in your life. Because the real light work is not just going into the higher consciousness, it's going down into the dark and then bringing that into the love. And it's like you can approve of it, or you can also like deeply accept it. And you can also just come into this place of non-judgment and let it go. But it all depends on where you're at with what works with the process. That's why also different parts of the process, it's like it's time to forgive. And Ho'oponopono is a powerful tool for that, because it's taking responsibility for your energy. And so as I did that, I experienced a shift. And I was stopped fearing looking at what was uncomfortable and what was in the shadow, because that's the thing, is like what you resist persists. So we think just by ignoring it and turning towards the quote unquote light that we're just in this state of flow, but really if you're resisting the resistance. That's why negative emotion is a beautiful indicator. If you just feel it, then don't resist the resistance. Allow yourself to feel the resistance and just use it as information, use it as data, and love it. And that's it. And that's what transmutes it. And then another powerful thing to do is connect to the electric energy, connect to the Kundalini energy, connect to your core energy, your fire energy. The fire energy in your lower belly, right? The fire, the creative energy, even the sexual energy. Energy it's an energy of creation, it's an energy of transmutation. So if you look at inner alchemy, it works a lot with the inner fire. So as you start to breathe that energy that gets stored and you start to feel through that energy and you start to do some breath work, breathing through that energy, clearing it, and then breathing it up into the heart. You can even pull up a little bit on the perineum, like pull the electric energy that's held there up into your heart, and then clear. And the heart is the gate of transformation, it's the gate of transmutation. And then even feeling those heavy emotions that come up and being, what is this trying to tell me? Because by not ignoring it, by not avoiding it, by just bringing your awareness at it, then you're not afraid of fear. You're not afraid of it. It's no longer a demon in the dark, right? Because you can make your shadow your friend. It's like the shadow is the unconscious parts of you that were created as kind of like a splintering of your own consciousness when you forgot who you were, that were created as allies to protect you. So if you've closed your heart down, maybe it's because you were hurt in the past. It's part of you trying to protect you, right? So if you stop demonizing your own shadow and instead become friends with your shadow, even the shadow, what the shadow is, transmutes. Because then you're not judging the shadow. And now the shadow is your ally. And now, in a way, that part of you can lay down as sword and shield. And something if I can create in the future is an inner journey as well to connect with these parts of yourself that it's like honoring and that have served you in the past, and understanding that like as you acknowledge and honor them and approve of them and love them instead of judging those parts of yourself, it dissolves the shame around that, which also dissolves any blockages around expressing and opening yourself to love and abundance and anything that is the shadow of the light. And then the light is revealed, and then those parts of yourself reveal gifts. Like I realized a part of me that was closed down and being the shy person was protecting me from feeling at an earlier time in my life that sense that I didn't feel like I belonged. And then when I came into a maturity, or that I was abandoned, and then when I came to a maturity and I was ready to feel through that, then it revealed a gift inside of it, and I honored that part of myself that was protecting me, and I embraced it, and then it was in a way able to lay down its sword and shield, and I was able to open myself up to genuine connections. Because it's also like, well, what if a part of you is actually protecting you from actual toxicity for a period of time? But then when you have genuine connections, like, wow, my heart is actually open to real connections with people. Right now, oh, okay, maybe there's a constriction that happened in your finances. Well, maybe that led you to be like, wow, I really want to live my purpose. Maybe you lost a job, and it's like, wow, what do I really want to do with my life? Like those periods of darkness where you go in and you investigate, there's a gift inside of that where it's like, now I understand what that is. I understand what that darkness is, and that dark night of the soul is a big period of that investigation and learning more about who we are, and then also what we really value. So that in that I could have compassion for that part of myself that was closed. And I could also allow myself to trust and know that I'm good, like I'm really good, and I'm actually supported. The shadow of where I didn't feel supported or connected to the community, and how I left that and how I rebelled against that led me to actually a place where I realized as I cleared through that I am in a new reality where I actually am supported. where you actually are loved, where you actually are seen. So it's not just like you clear through the shadow and it's like now you don't feel bad. It's like your reality actually changes. A part of you is acting as a protection in the unconsciousness, and through your consciousness bringing light and awakening, right? That's the real enlightenment, is like illuminating all parts of yourself. It's like Carl Jung said, you know, until we make the unconscious conscious, it'll rule our life and we'll call it fate. But you can change your fate, which is a real act of magic to do in your life, by integrating the shadow and the light, which is also the unconscious and the conscious, which then it changes our whole relationship with it, and we realize that those places where we want to do it, like we want to become aware of whatever's there, because we're no longer fearing it. And if fear's coming up, we can embrace that too. We can embrace that as part of it. But by embracing it, by not resisting it, it no longer has power over you. And then you can turn your awareness with consciousness towards the light, because now you've freed up that energy. That trapped energy now raises up, and you have a higher energy level, right? And it releases this energy into your body that actually allows more energy for manifestation. So it's not just like, oh, I don't want to go there, I don't want to focus on the negative because it's going to create more of it. No, it's like you're looking at it from a non-dual perspective. You're just looking at what's there through the lens of love. It's not the same as complaining or staying in the negative. In fact, what it does is, by being able to look at the darkness in yourself, you can understand where the darkness in the world comes from. And then now when you're not afraid of your own darkness, you're not afraid of the darkness in the world. And not only that, the manifestations of it don't enter your field. I'm not saying that that's a fixed rule. Like, we're going to become aware of certain. I'm talking about your immediate energetic field. Like, you literally become a sovereign, more whole self, realized self, an alchemist of your own reality. And I'm saying that those kinds of experiences of toxicity and all this stuff, like, you literally can live in a magical reality filled with harmonious relationships and love and abundance and all the good things, because the Most High, the light, the real light that is moving through all things, including going into the crevices and merging with it. That's also like our consciousness and our conscious mind and our subconscious merging together. And when we have a totally different relationship with shadow that even transcends all of that, where it's like now the shadow becomes more like the unknown. It becomes more like the yin. It becomes more like the womb of creation, and the yang. The conscious mind becomes more like this masculine, and then it's like you're more in the reality creation. But as we get to the point of being the creators of our reality, I believe that for many of us, it's not just like, oh, law of attraction, focus on the positive, think good thoughts. It's like actually doing the deep work of integration and of healing, because really the healing is the clearing that reveals the light through which the shadow is cast. And as the light returns and merges with the shadow comes into the light, and you have more awareness, and you're actually happier. You're actually not as negative, and it's easier for you to do your affirmations, and there's less force involved. There's less desperation or attachment to result, because you've loved that anxious part of yourself that didn't get its needs met. Now you're in a place where you find the feeling of stability and security within yourself, and so that's what manifests externally as the place to live and as the money. You find the sense of connection and support within yourself, so that manifests as a community that really supports you. You find the sense of confidence within yourself, so then you feel confident to be yourself and be authentic and share your gifts. You find the sense of love, and so on. You find the sense of love within yourself, and then you experience loving relationships, and you experience a loving and beautiful world. That's actually what we create through merging the light and the shadow. So the shadow work and the light work, the shadow work is the light work. The light work is the shadow work. right? That's reconciling opposites. That's finding the balance within ourselves. Because we're out in the world and we're gonna see, like, that's what we do. That's like what light workers do. They come here to bring the light. But that's where the light is needed. And that's where it's like, okay, as you do that and you clear, then you can bless yourself, and then you can be a blessing for others. So the homework for today is to try out the shadow work meditation included below. And there's an MP3 that you can download, and that will help to clear your energy and to integrate, and also to heal your relationship with your own masculine and feminine energy, as well as your inner child. And this will allow you to feel more free in your energy and in your emotions, to move into the next stage of pursuing your passionate purpose. See you on the next video.